What is the difference between menopause, perimenopause, and premenopause?
Menopause is actually that one day in your life where you can say retrospectively and that when you have not had a period for 12 months straight. Premenopause is when you might have mild or no symptoms, but the hormone levels might start slowly declining. That's usually age 40, even earlier sometimes. And perimenopause is when hormone levels start slowly declining. And then that's when you usually have the most pronounced symptoms. That's when the two hormones that you usually worry about, your progesterone starts declining gradually, and estrogen, that's the other hormone, starts kind of jumping up and down for quite a while. It goes on a roller coaster ride, which can last for years. And so that perimenopause time is usually the most difficult. Far East in Japan, women do not report so many menopausal symptoms as we do in the Western world. What is different about those women, they tend to be on average slimmer. So the BMI, the body mass index, is a bit lower. Then they do have a very high consumption of soya and very little dairy. And then when those women move to the Western world, when they immigrate, based on the questionnaires, the rate of menopausal symptoms again goes up and catches up with the Western women. So it's not just the genes, it's something else above the genes, and that's potentially the diet. When I noticed my first symptoms, and that was a couple of years ago, it was just night sweats. I completely freaked out. And you imagine the worst. It must be some rare form of leukemia. It must be something horrible happening to you. And having the medical knowledge didn't help at all. If that was me, being a doctor, I should have been well prepared for all of that. How would a woman who doesn't have any medical knowledge, how would she react to all of this? And it could be quite disturbing and scary, and and it's difficult. I think the most common trigger would be alcohol, what we consider normal in society. And the reason alcohol is going to be quite important is because estrogen is regulating your little thermostat that tells your body how hot or cold it is. So with estrogen not being there to do that, its job basically, then alcohol unfortunately upsets that little thermostat even further. So if you're then throwing alcohol into the mixture of an upset or up and down roller coaster ride of the estrogen already, that's just going to make your symptoms a lot worse.
Any thoughts around fasting in menopause?
And so fasting helps to get your microbiome at a healthier level, basically. So your listeners get, scared. I'm going to tell them to starve themselves. Guess what? You are doing fasting every night already when you are sleeping. So, and that's at least 8 hours every night. I would hope so. And if you can increase that, meal-free time from 8 to 9 hours to 10 hours or even 12 hours, you will, again, maximize how healthy your microbiome is going to be. And then maximize the benefit from your either HRT or from your own hormones.
I'm joined again here at Fever Radio with Dr. Olga Morton. Dr. Olga is an NHS GP and certified lifestyle medicine physician who also holds a PhD in autoimmune diseases and immunity and has extensive knowledge about the link between healthy lifestyle and disease reversal. And in today's program, we're going to be talking to Dr. Olga about menopause, perimenopause, and premenopause. How are you doing, Olga?
I'm very well, thank you.
Lovely to have you join us again, and thank you very much for taking the time. Now, a big deal this, to be perfectly honest, and something that's been in the media a fair bit the last couple of years. I guess, first of all, perhaps you could explain to our listeners, what is the difference between menopause, perimenopause, and premenopause?
Well, thank you so much for having me here, first of all. So yes, those are slightly different things. So menopause is actually that one day in your life where you can say retrospectively and that when you have not had a period for 12 months straight, then you can say, okay, now I've reached menopause. Premenopause is when you might have very mild or no symptoms, but the hormone levels might start slowly declining. So a lot of women might not be aware of that stage at all, but that's usually kind of at around age 40, even earlier sometimes. And perimenopause is when the hormone level starts slowly declining. And then that's when you usually have the most pronounced symptoms. That's when your progesterone, the two hormones that you tend to usually worry about for women, is your progesterone starts declining gradually, and estrogen, that's the other hormone, starts kind of jumping up and down for quite a while actually, and it does this goes on a roller coaster ride, which can last for years. And so that perimenopause time is usually the most difficult
Okay,
time
got
for
you.
women to deal with.
Got you. So it's pre-menopause, perimenopause, and then essentially
Menopause.
when you've gone through
Yes.
the process, you've got
Yes.
menopause at the very end of that. Okay, great. And I mean, and this comes with, I mean, and you're saying perimenopause is the more difficult period, which can often come with many different symptoms like night sweats, hot flushes, mood swings, feeling hot, feeling warm, brain fog, physical changes to the body, tiredness, sleepless nights.
Absolutely.
There's
Yes.
a long list,
The
long list
list is
here.
the list is endless, yes. Because every woman is different and they can be so subtle as well sometimes. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And so how long does pre or perimenopause generally tend to last?
Well, it's really individual, and it varies from woman to woman, and it's very hard to put a number on it.
Hmm.
And again, you kind of would have, the average age for menopause in Britain is at around age of 51. That's average. Okay, so that's when a woman would have not had a period for 12 months straight.
Right.
But that perimenopause time is very variable. But again, just because you have not had your periods and you've reached menopause doesn't mean that that's the end of your symptoms. The symptoms can still continue and go on. Yes, they technically should be a little bit milder, but again, every woman is different.
Okay. All right. And so with regards to, I mean, you're a lifestyle doctor, so your approach to this
Yes.
is slightly different than kind of prescribing pills and potions and what have you. I
Yes.
imagine your first step towards approaching it. So are there certain foods that we should be looking at during these pre and perimenopause periods? Any foods to avoid during menopause, perimenopause?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. Yes, so I'm first of all, yes, I'm a GP, so I'm by no means I'm not a gynecologist, or I wouldn't call myself an HRT specialist, for example. But what I've noticed in my practice, women who would come to see me with menopausal symptoms, and yes, I do prescribe HRT as part of my GP work. But I've noticed some of them would come back, either having had tried HRT and it didn't work for them, or they would have tried different types of HRT, various combinations. And then I felt powerless because I didn't know how else to help them because their symptoms continued. And with my lifestyle hat on, I always, thought, well, there must be something else that we should be able to do for these women.
Hmm.
And that's where the lifestyle approach came in. And absolutely, diet is going to be one of them. And so, not only also not only what to eat, which is important, but also when to eat. If it comes to, treating perimenopausal symptoms. Again, diet is difficult to study. But what we do know that, for example, in the Far East, in Japan, women do not report so many menopausal symptoms as we do in the Western world. And what is different about those women, they tend to be on average slimmer. So the BMI, the body mass index, is a bit lower. Then they do have a very high consumption of soya and very little dairy intake. And so, and then when those women move to the Western world, when they immigrate, the rate of, again, based on the questionnaires, the rate of menopausal symptoms again goes up and catches up with the Western women. So that means that it's not just the genes, it's something else above the genes, and that's potentially, the diet. And why soy is important, because it has natural plant estrogens, phytoestrogens, that might be protective or helping to go through, perimenopause.
Okay, so you're saying you're mentioning specifically Japanese women there, but obviously in the East, there's a lot of I guess in China, I presume there's a lot of soy
Yes,
consumption.
right.
In
Yes.
in Korean countries as well, probably a lot of
True.
soy consumption. But is it specifically Japanese ladies that do really
I think
well, or
Yeah, no, I think the study was basically focusing on the question of the Japanese women. But if you look at the diet of, in general, in the diet of the women in the Far East, that includes, I'm sure, Vietnam and Cambodia and the other areas of the world where the dairy consumption is low and the soy consumption is high.
hmm.
And I'm sure that probably will again correlate with what was happening in studies in Japan.
And you're saying that soy looks like a good choice for ladies, just looking at the kind of experience.
Well,
Um,
yes, I mean, looking at the studies from Japan, but again, you might ask yourself, well, I don't like soy and I'm not used to soy, and what else then can you do? Well, the good news is other types of phytoestrogens are found in other vegetables and plants like flax seeds,
hmm.
linseeds, beans, and chickpeas, some fruits, especially melons. And if you again look at it, it's the plant-centric diet is going to be helpful. Um, if you look at again women in Mediterranean, they don't tend to have very prominent or pronounced perimenopausal symptoms, and that's potentially again due to the Mediterranean style diet,
What do
which
we?
could be easily applied
hmm.
to us or for us in the West if soya is something that somebody doesn't like the taste of it or doesn't want to try it because we're not used to it really.
And so, what would be the presumption of what foods are useful in the Mediterranean diet for menopause type symptoms?
So that would be the vegetables I've just mentioned and the seeds.
The medicine, okay.
Yes, yeah, because of again the high level of the phytoestrogens in those foods.
Okay, and you're mentioning, of course, that the low dairy consumption in Japanese women also
Yes.
seems to be
Which might
beneficial.
again, which might have something to do with it.
Okay. All right. I mean, I've also I'm talking to one of our listeners who has been having some issues with menopause symptoms. They wondered about for hot flushes, what kind of foods would be useful to include for hot flushes, and mentioned that citrus in the morning can actually cause hot flushes.
Hmm.
So I mean that's interesting, isn't it? Because something like citrus, which you'd imagine is quite cooling and quite rich in vitamin C,
Yeah,
etc., but
yeah,
actually being identified, people might have a
yeah.
lemon water in the morning to
Hmm.
cleanse the body or what have you. Seems like a sensible idea in almost all cases,
Yeah.
but actually that could cause a hot flush. Would that be right?
I think spicy foods in general as well. There
Hmm.
have been been some reports to show that they can make the hot flushes symptoms worse. But I'll tell you what you should avoid to reduce your hot flushes. There was an RCT study, it's a randomized control study done by Neil Barnard and his group.
Hmm.
And what they did was it was only 38 participants. Fair enough, it's a small study, but still, it gave us some idea of what happens if you take women on a typical Western diet, which basically tends to contain high processed foods.
Hmm.
The biscuits and pastries, and again, loads of dairy, loads of sugary stuff. And those women, for 12 weeks, were moved on to whole food and processed plant-centric diet with loads of vegetables, loads of fruit and seeds and nuts and lentils. And just even in 12 weeks' time, there was a reduction of hot flushes by 86%. So that's quite significant, if you think about
It's
it.
huge.
So,
It's huge, isn't it?
yes, and not only that, the other um, aspects of the perimenopausal symptoms like psychosocial, the anxiety and even sexual function, again, that also had improved. Not to that extent as the hot flushes, but still, it's something to pay attention to.
Okay, so moving away from processed foods towards whole plant, phytonutrient rich, antioxidant rich type
Yes.
food seems to be the way to go if you're suffering with menopause type symptoms. And I mean, these symptoms can be quite severe, can't they? I mean, there's been reports in the press of relatively famous people who, hopefully you're going to remind me of the name because they've skipped my mind at the moment, who've really suffered with menopause symptoms,
I mean,
and been brushed off by their GPs or by
yeah,
the standard
and
medical establishment as you've just got period
absolutely.
pains. Kind of go.
It can be debilitating, it can be life-changing. And remember, I think what we are dealing with in menopause in the 21st century, women now, um, we've got it really, I mean, on the one hand, we've got all these modern treatments and it should be easier. On the other hand, our lives are so different now. Women have a lot more responsibilities to deal with, I think, by the time you're, age late 40s, 50.
Hmm.
You usually have a career to hold on to. You've usually got a family to look after, teenage children with themselves. These days, a lot of teenagers have, mental health problems, and you need to be the carer for them. And then you have elderly parents that you, again, are becoming carer for them at the same time. So I think it's pretty difficult to juggle it all, and the expectation from the society is that we should be, doing everything beautifully, and
Hmm.
then of course menopause hits you, and that could be totally life-changing again. I mean, I don't know how for, other women, but when I noticed my first symptoms, and that was a couple of years ago, it was just night sweats, and I completely freaked out because I thought, and you imagine the worst because you think, well, that's it. It must be some rare form of leukemia. It must be something horrible happening to you. And having the medical knowledge didn't help at all. And
Yeah,
I
I'm
thought,
sure that's like half the problem, isn't it, in this
and,
case?
but then I, and then I thought to myself, my goodness, like if that was me, being a doctor, I should have been well prepared for all of that. And I completely lost it for a while. How would a woman who doesn't have any medical knowledge, how would she react to all of this? And it could be quite disturbing and scary, and it's difficult.
Mm.
And then when you go to see a doctor, as you said, yeah, it really depends, and I think it varies. I mean, we are having this conversation now, which is great, and there's a lot more awareness and talk about menopause in general, which it used to be almost a taboo, and women did not feel comfortable talking about it. And so that is changing.
And that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
That's a
Yes.
very, very important thing, a very important evolution in our society. I would argue. Okay, so, I guess if you're having hot flushes, the idea that chilies might be beneficial doesn't quite sit correct with me. Doesn't seem rational. Let's say, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. I mean, are spices and chilies good for menopause? I mean, it doesn't just have to be the spicy variety, the chilies. There's other spices as well, right? Like ajwain, carom seeds, turmeric, things like that. And generally spices are very rich sources of antioxidants and
Absolutely.
phytonutrients.
Yeah.
So, and we just said that phytonutrients, antioxidants are
Mm.
beneficial. So, I mean, what about spices?
I guess try it. It's a trial and error thing. I wouldn't say that you must not eat spices if you feel that you're going through it, but try to not to have them in your diet for a while and see what happens, see how your body reacts to it. In my experience, I think the most common trigger would be alcohol.
Okay.
And I'm talking about what we consider normal in society. And the reason alcohol is going to be quite important is because what happens with declining levels of estrogen? Estrogen is regulating your little thermostat, that little inner body temperature control that you have that tells your body how hot or cold it is. So with estrogen not being there to do that, its job basically, then alcohol unfortunately upsets that little thermostat even further. So if you're then throwing alcohol into the mixture of an upset or up and down roller coaster ride of the estrogen already, that's just going to make your symptoms a lot worse. And so for a lot of women, what we've noticed that just by even reducing the alcohol consumption, and that could be, just the other thing again, women don't know, I'm just, a slight kind of sidetrack here, is the breast cancer risk. So and we are so concerned about HRT and how is it safe or is it not safe, but we don't always realize that actually the data from the Cancer Research UK was that even having 3 glasses of wine per week increases your breast cancer risk by 15%. And so, and for a lot of women, 3 glasses per week is, pretty normal, pretty safe, but we don't always, again, realize it. And then because we don't realize it, we don't actually talk about it. And so I think if we're going to really maximize our, the benefit from the diet and what else can we do, I think those are the low-hanging fruits we should really address first. But yes, spices, if it's something that is making your hot flashes worse, try not having them for a while and see how your body reacts to it.
Okay. I mean, what about turmeric? I mean, would that be useful? Seems to be useful for pretty much everything.
Yes, I mean, again, it's anti-inflammatory, isn't it? But it's not really. I think the spices that maybe I need to look into turmeric, actually, I'll be honest with you. I haven't come across it being or triggering hot flashes and making the symptoms worse. But logically thinking, you'd think because it's an anti-inflammatory, it shouldn't really do that.
Okay. All right. And so what about improving deep, uninterrupted sleep? And do menopausal women need more sleep, as they're going through the change?
It's a tricky one, absolutely. I mean, it's tricky because first of all, with the hot flashes and the night sweats, your sleep will be disrupted. And then if your sleep is disrupted and sleep will be affecting your hormone balance as well, like it affects so many other bodily systems. So, and having a good sleep hygiene is crucial. 100%. Because if your sleep is going to be upside down already or with menopause or with the symptoms, you really need to prioritize it and make sure that you get enough sleep. And again, what is that magic number? It's usually between 7 to 9 hours, every night, but it's again different for every woman. And there are a few hacks, I talk about when I again advise on it on menopause is keeping to the same sleep routine, avoiding the social jet lag is that variability. What happens when you are at the weekend? We tend to stay up a bit late and trying to catch up with that sleep later on, and that disrupts your day and night, basically body rhythm or the circadian rhythm. So having your temperature slightly cooler in the bedroom, that's kind of logical, isn't it? If you're hot and sweaty already, you don't want it to be too warm. And alcohol, we've already touched upon that. Caffeine is another one. So coffee is not going to kill us, so to say, yeah, but it does have a longer half-life for some women, and it's a stimulant. So for some women, it could be as long as up to 12 hours of the half-life of caffeine. So if you've had it at lunchtime, by midnight, you will still have some of that caffeine circulating in your bloodstream, and that will affect your sleep. So if you are one of those women, you maybe want to have your coffee a little bit early in the day and be a bit more careful with it.
Okay.
Oh, decaf. And of course the blue light. Yeah, so we do need daylight to produce the natural sleep hormone melatonin. And that's super, super important because if we don't have that daylight exposure for at least half an hour a day, then that natural melatonin in your body will not be there in the evening. That will make you sleepy. But on the other hand, if we're exposed to the blue light, which is mimicking daylight, like the devices, the computers, phones, then the body will be confused, thinking, okay, is this daytime? Are we still all right? Are we still, am I supposed to be awake? Or is this now time to wind down? And that's when your melatonin is going to go up. And so, and I fully appreciate, again, we're busy, we've got work deadlines and we'll have to work, but then the solutions would be to use maybe blue light blocking glasses
Hmm.
or the blue light blocking devices on most computers and laptops, and would have them now so that you don't get that blue light exposure just before you go to bed.
Okay, so the light and good sleep hygiene is obviously of
Yeah.
importance. I mean, a lot of ladies who have who are going through the menopause complain about a lack of being able to focus, brain fog, and the such like. Is there any recommendation you can give there?
Um, Again, sticking to all the aspects of again, what I when I talk about um how lifestyle approach to menopause, it's not just that one thing.
Hmm.
It's the nutritious, the right diet, it's the sleep routine, it's the exercise, which helps a lot of women with brain fog and also mood swings, for example,
Hmm.
because exercise releases natural feel-good hormones and endorphins. And for a lot of women, exercise helps them focus, and exercise helps them avoid that brain fog, at least reduce it.
Okay. I mean, what about fasting? Would that be something useful for menopause? I mean, a lot of people do intermittent fasting, for instance, or
Hmm. Yes,
I mean, even periodically, people may fast for a day, for a week, or what have you.
yes.
I mean, any thoughts around fasting in menopause?
Um, I think if we're talking about fasting, we probably should mention gut microbiome.
Hmm.
Um, so those are the healthy trillion microorganisms in your body that are amongst all the other functions, they actually are responsible for um, processing your hormones. So, if you have a healthy gut microbiome, the hormones that you have in your body are more likely to work better for you, basically, even if you're taking external hormones like HRT. If you're having a healthy gut microbiome, that same HRT will work much better for you. And so fasting helps to get your microbiome, at a healthier level, basically. So, and I think from that point of view, yes. And I wouldn't talk. I mean, before your listeners get scared, I'm gonna tell them to starve themselves. Guess what? You are doing fasting every night already when you are sleeping, without realizing that you are actually micro fasting. So, and that's at least 8 hours every night. I would hope so. And if you can increase that, meal-free time from 8 to 9 hours to 10 hours or even 12 hours, you will again maximize your, you know, how healthy your microbiome is going to be, and then maximize the benefit from your either HRT or from your internal, your own hormones.
Hmm. So fasting may have some benefit then, is what you're saying.
Yes. Yes.
And these things. I mean, I do wonder because obviously the one of the things of the menopause is the cessation of menses or periods, right?
Hmm.
And until a woman goes through the menopause, that's actually a very efficient way to kind of cleanse the body of toxins or what have you, right? And then that's obviously starting to become less and less during the period of pre and perimenopausal symptoms, and then obviously ceases when menopause hits. So maybe part of the issues that ladies are facing in terms of symptoms is down to the body having to change how it would typically cleanse and replenish each month, and now that's going, so it's having to rebalance in a different way. I mean, does that sound about right, or is that just an out there kind of theory?
It does sound about right. I mean, if you think about it logically, I don't know whether, I mean, I need to look at it. Is there any kind of scientific evidence to specifically, and name that as one of the factors? But
Mm.
if you think about it, I mean, detoxing again is one of those things that I always mention in my, program. If I would say, how else can we help you using that holistic approach? And by detoxing, it's not just talking about alcohol and smoking. I mean, we have been exposed to 80,000 plus toxins in the last 30 years through the environments, pesticides, herbicides, agriculture, etc., etc. And yes, the good news is we have our liver to deal with it, but then the liver has a certain capacity. And then with the Western diet, we tend to have with the fatty liver at the moment. I mean, I see patients being diagnosed with fatty liver a lot. And again, not much really. Yes, they are, put in register and we monitor them. But again, this is a metabolic disease, really. And this is something that we need to talk about, because if your liver is not healthy, it can't detox the toxins for you. And so, absolutely. And women in premenopause will be, again, sensitive to those changes. And that is why we need to then talk about overall health. Overall, that's why we talk about diet and how can we get your liver healthier so that it can deal with all the toxins. So then you can be, again, empower you so that you can be in charge of your health, also how to maximize your own the effect of your own hormones that are still circulating in your body, but also if you choose to have external HRT, how do you maximize the effect of that to help your symptoms?
Okay, so probably a question for the beginning part of the interview, but would you recommend HRT to ladies going through the menopause?
It's a very individual question, yeah. So it's an individual choice, and I think women should have a choice. I think that's the most important thing. Yes, HRT has been in the spotlight a lot in the last few years, and it has helped a lot of women. And I've had patients who, whose life had turned around, after the use of HRT, and they're very happy. But then there are patients who come to see me who have tried it all and it doesn't work for them. And then there are patients who simply are not safe or cannot have HRTs. And then what are their options? And yes, there are alternatives. There's CBT, there's herbal remedies, aromatherapy. But the good news is the lifestyle changes will work for most women, for all women, and they are safe. And not only you will improve your menopausal symptoms, you will improve your overall metabolic health, which in turn will help you further down the line, for the rest of your life, really.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. Thank you very much for giving us some information there about perimenopause, premenopause, and menopause itself, and the treatment thereof, Dr. Olga Morton. Where are there any resources that people can reach out to if they're interested in looking at treating menopause symptoms with a lifestyle approach?
Well, I'm a member of the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine, and we have a website, the BSLM website, that has resources for patients. Plant-based health professionals, UK, again, have fantastic resources for patients which are free. I have given a few webinars, and I do local events as well on the topic. And I'm about to post a recent webinar on my website, which you can have as a free resource, and that describes it in more detail, what we talked about today. And yes, and my website is www.drolgamorton.com.
Great. Thank you once again, Dr. Olga Morton, for sharing your thoughts around menopause and the many symptoms that come out of it with our listeners here at Fever Radio.
Thank you so much for having me.